The headline in the New York Post was FBI did not believe it had probable cause to raid Mar-a-Lago for classified documents. Bombshell files show. And basically what had happened is Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa had released internal records. And the New York Post article, an FBI official noted that agents had spent 6 counterproductive weeks trying to establish they had grounds for a search warrant, but they were essentially overruled by the DOJ, with one top official grouching that he, quote, frankly didn't give a damn about the optics. Now, that's taken out of context. We'll get there. One official saying, we haven't generated any new facts, but keep being given draft after draft after draft. One FBI Washington field office official groused, is what the Post says, in July of 2022. Quote, absent a witness coming forward with recent information about classified on the site, at what point is it fair to table this? Now, Grassley put out a headline, FBI did not believe it had probable cause, called it a miscarriage of justice. The communications revealed that the Bureau wanted the warrant to be executed in a professional, low-key manner, mindful of the optics of the search. Quote, the FBI's Washington field office said it does not believe and has articulated to DOJ that we have established probable cause for the search warrant for classified records. I'm just continuing to read from this article. I don't want to read the whole thing, and then I'll get to the point. They're just summarizing the raid, etc. Earlier emails revealed DOJ officials wanted a search warrant ready as early as June 6th. For a meeting with Trump's lawyer in case the president didn't play ball, quote, and were adamant that no accommodation be given to extend an earlier May deadline for the documents. Now, remember, this is already after extensions had been provided, lies had been told by Trump's team about what was there. This wasn't the beginning of the conversation, but that's not the main point here. Basically, what happened is there was a person in the FBI who had objected on the grounds of whether they had probable cause at that time to believe that there were classified documents on site. Now, it turns out there were classified markings in particular, whether this phony sort of declassified them argument doesn't relate to the subpoena for classified markings on them. But here's the problem with this quote unquote bombshell. President Trump's favorite judge, Aileen Cannon, had already seen this stuff and determined that it didn't impact probable cause for the search. This is what so few are talking about. Matt Naham, with Law and Crime, which I founded, talks about how Fox was the one who, quote, broke the story. The opening lines of the, quote, exclusive Fox story contended Tuesday that newly declassified documents showed the Biden Justice Department engaged in a pressure campaign to move the Mar-a-Lago probe forward, quoting former Deputy Assistant Attorney General George Toscas as saying on a 2022 call that he didn't give a damn about the optics. Trump then said, unreasonable search and seizure. That was the FBI's criminal raid on Mar-a-Lago. This can never be allowed to happen again. Caroline Leavitt said the FBI did not believe it had probable cause to raid President Trump's home, but moved forward amid pressure from the Biden Justice Department. It's not true that the FBI didn't believe that they had probable cause. Now, the reason that the I don't give a damn about the optics line may sound familiar is because it repeatedly showed up in Trump defense motions more than a year ago, challenging the validity of the warrant based on alleged omissions by the government. The May 2024, quote, motion for relief relating to the Mar-a-Lago raid and unlawful piercing of the attorney-client privilege said the search was unconstitutional. In that motion, they said the defense complained that the search went forward despite FBI objections and internal debate. The defense asked Judge Aileen Cannon, who's the one who ultimately dismissed the case, to order what's called a Franks hearing. It's where a defendant challenges the truthfulness of an affidavit used in support of a search warrant. They said they could make a substantial preliminary showing that the government had lied by omission, and they claimed that those omitted facts could have made all the difference and would have prevented a finding of probable cause. Meaning, if everything else had been known, there wouldn't have been a finding of probable cause. The Trump teams alleged that an FBI special agent who submitted the application intentionally or recklessly misled the issuing magistrate on at least 4 issues. And they go through what the issues were. Trump's lawyers, they argued that Smith made false arguments that the government, quote, had no choice but to seek a search warrant. And their proof was the omission about the FBI's apparent belief that the objective of the search could have been accomplished through a call to Trump's lawyers, and the fact that this guy had said he didn't give a damn about the optics. Didn't give a damn about the optics is like the headline of all these stories as if it's new. So just 18 days before she throws out the cases, here's what she said on this particular issue. All right? The issue we're talking about right now. Defendant Trump has not made the requisite substantial preliminary showing to warrant a Franks hearing. He identifies 4 omissions in the warrant, but none of the omitted information, even if added to the affidavit in support of the warrant, would have defeated a finding of probable cause. Judge Aileen Cannon wrote, adding in a footnote, the motion does not meaningfully challenge the presence of probable cause in the affidavit. And she went on to say that the omitted details about, quote, dissenting views of other FBI agents and one person's support for contacting Trump's attorney, seeking consent instead, were an insufficient basis to believe that the evidentiary calculus in support of probable cause would have been altered by the information, meaning the omissions could not defeat the probable cause. Why? Because there was a ton of probable cause. And of all people, Judge Aileen Cannon recognized it. So spare me the bombshell this and, oh my goodness, if we had only known, this would have changed everything. They did know. And they brought it to the most Trump-friendly judge out there. And even she said, this isn't enough.
So, friends, we just learned that articles of impeachment are being drafted by a bipartisan team of congressmen to impeach Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for their clear, obvious, and inarguable violation of federal law, the Epstein Transparency Act, a violation that is serving as a cover-up. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, Donald Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is violating federal law every minute of every day that she refuses to disclose the Epstein files, as is required by legislation that was signed into law by Donald Trump himself. Now, I want to start with the new reporting, and I'm going to read a good bit of it because I want you to hear just how angry, how furious members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, are about Bondi's clear violation of law and how it is serving as a cover-up. This from The Guardian. Headline, outrage and legal threats. Trump Justice Department slammed after limited Epstein files released. Lawmakers voiced frustration over heavy redactions and the apparent removal of files from government website. And that article begins, Donald Trump's Justice Department was hit with legal threats and scathing outrage after authorities released a limited, heavily redacted trove of Jeffrey Epstein files in an apparent violation of the law mandating the near-complete disclosure of these documents by Friday. This quote from Representative Ro Khanna, who was the co-sponsor of the bill, the Epstein Transparency Act, quote, the Justice Department's document dump this afternoon does not comply with Thomas Massie and my Epstein Transparency Act. Ro Khanna, the California Democrat congressman who co-authored the law requiring full disclosure of all Epstein files, by 19 December, said in a video statement, quote, "It is an incomplete release with too many redactions. Thomas Massie and I are exploring all options." He also said, among them, possible impeachment of Justice Department officials, finding them in contempt of Congress. Khanna also floated the possibility of referring for prosecution those who are obstructing justice. And this quote from Republican Representative Thomas Massie, quote, "Unfortunately, today's document release by AG Bondi and Deputy AG Todd Blanche grossly fails to comply with both the spirit and the letter of the law that Donald Trump signed just 30 days ago. Representative Ro Khanna is correct," Massie, a Kentucky member of Congress and co-author of this legislation, said on X, quote, "A future Justice Department could convict the current AG and others because the Epstein Files Transparency Act is not like a congressional subpoena, which expires at the end of each Congress," Massie said at another point. Frustrations mounted on Saturday as the Justice Department released some new files, including transcripts, while also removing more than a dozen others from its website related to Epstein with no explanation. At least 16 files disappeared from the department's public webpage, according to an Associated Press tally. The documents included images of paintings depicting nude women and one showing a series of photographs along a credenza in the drawers. In that image, inside a drawer, among other photos, is a photograph of Trump alongside Epstein, Melania Trump, and Epstein's longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. Trump's Justice Department was required to release all investigative files involving the late financier by 19 December under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The legislation does allow for records to be withheld or redacted if their disclosure would imperil present criminal investigations, threaten national security, or identify Epstein's victims, but otherwise it mandates disclosure of everything else. New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was among the bipartisan chorus of lawmakers slamming Trump's Justice Department, including the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi and the FBI Director Kash Patel for the document's lackluster rollout. Quote, "Now the cover-up is out in the open. This is far from over. Everyone involved will have to answer for this," Ocasio-Cortez, a New York Democrat, said on X on Friday. Quote, "Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, whole administration, protecting a bunch of rapists and pedophiles because they have money, power, and connections. Bondi should resign tonight." Now, of course, AG Bondi won't resign tonight, but here's an important update from a brand new interview that my friend and partner in the Legal Breakdown, Brian Tyler Cohen, just conducted with Representative Ro Khanna. Quote, "Representative Massie and I are drafting articles of impeachment as we speak about Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche." Okay, friends, a few takeaways. First of all, there is no argument, no plausible argument, no implausible argument, no argument whatsoever that Pam Bondi has complied with the federal law to disclose all of the Epstein files, with a few very narrow, limited exceptions like to protect the identity of victims. Some of the reporting says that given this document dump, it may actually account for less than 1% of all of the Epstein files. And yet, friends, back in July, do you remember what Pam Bondi was having Kash Patel's FBI do before there was ever a law requiring the disclosure of all of the Epstein files? Here is what the FBI was busy doing. Headline: FBI personnel were told to flag Epstein files mentioning Trump. Senate Democrat. Senate Democratic Whip Dick Durbin pressed Justice Department leadership about their handling of the files related to the federal investigation into the late Jeffrey Epstein, including reports that FBI personnel were instructed to flag any records that mentioned President Donald Trump. In a series of oversight letters written to Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, Durbin questioned Bondi about contradictions in her public statements on the case, Patel about reports that he was pressured by Bondi to place 1,000 personnel on 24-hour shifts to mine roughly 100,000 Epstein-related records, and Bongino about reported disputes among Trump officials about the lack of transparency in their handling of the high-profile case. Friends, think about that. Before there was ever a law requiring the disclosure of anything, Pam Bondi is pressuring the FBI, directing the FBI to put 1,000 agents on the task of scouring the Epstein files for references to Donald Trump, obviously in an attempt to protect Trump. And now, when there is a law requiring disclosure of all of the Epstein files, it seems like Bondi's attitude is, screw that. I'm not putting sufficient resources into that endeavor. I'm not going to comply with the federal law. You know, friends, that is abject lawlessness by Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche. And let's face it, they're not going to hold themselves accountable for violating federal law. They're the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. Do you think they're going to launch, an investigation into their own misconduct, their own violation of a federal statute? Of course not. But when the rule of law comes back into the light of day, and it will, when this dark chapter in our nation's history is over, this Donald Trump lawlessness and unconstitutionality, they will need to be held accountable for their violations of federal law. Because justice matters. To us, it matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.